Aisha? At a fancy restaurant, the CEO glared at me with a frown. Can't blame him. This blind date set up by my college professor, Mr. Smith, was between me, a high school grad who's an average employee, and the CEO's daughter. A pair that totally doesn't match. But the moment I entered the room, she declared, "I've chosen him." The reason she chose me is that she knows my secret. I live in New York and I'm 34, currently working in sales at a construction company. Day in and day out, it's just commuting between home and work. I don't have friends to hang out casually with. To outsiders, my life might seem utterly dull, uninteresting, and monotonous. But for me, it's comforting. A life of solitude, free from interference, affecting no one. That's what I chose for myself. As I got home, my cell phone rang right on cue. The name displayed was terribly nostalgic.
Hello?
The caller was my college professor, Mr. Smith. As soon as I answered, his lethargic tone, always so vivid in my mind, began the conversation.
Want to try blind dating? What are you talking about? Are you drunk or something? Well, I might have had a drink or two, but I'm dead serious. So about the date. Wait. I haven't agreed to anything yet. Stubborn as always. It's just 2 hours of your long life ahead. 2 hours won't hurt, right? 2 hours might not hurt, but, right? I've decided to stay single for the rest of my life. Okay then, let's just grab coffee next weekend and talk then. Let's say 1 p.m. at our usual cafe.
The call ended abruptly, and I dived into bed, exasperated. Mr. Smith was never the meddlesome type. In fact, he seemed the least interested in others. It was hard to believe such a person would suggest a blind date for me. Could it be someone who found out my secret and got close to Mr. Smith? I've always had the bad habit of overthinking about others. No matter how much I ponder, I can never truly guess someone's true intentions. After taking a shower, I had a sandwich I bought from a convenience store and watched some celebrities on TV, living lives opposite to mine. The room was filled with laughter. Of course, none of it was mine. I arrived at the meeting place way earlier than the scheduled time, and as always, Mr. Smith was already seated.
I thought I'd be the first one here today.
Too bad for you. I've been here since it opened. Had some documents to work on.
When a familiar waitress came to us, Mr. Smith closed his laptop.
Coffee for me and a BLT sandwich, please.
Can I have another cup of coffee too?
The waitress nodded. "This is already my 5th drink of the day," Mr. Smith said with a proud smile, though there was a cowlick in his hair. His thick glasses were smudged with fingerprints, and there were small lint balls on his sweater, giving him the same old plain look. "I won't be attending the blind date, just so you know."
You could at least ask me who she is.
You're not telling me it's one of your students, right?
I met her at a conference. She's quite a beauty. Probably too good for plain old you, though.
Plain? Both sides feel frustrated that we have the same impression.
So who is she?
Mr. Smith took a sip of his coffee and scratched his head. Clearing his throat slightly, he said, she has a lie, just like you.
I felt a pang in my heart at the mention of the word lie. Yes, I have a certain lie about myself that I was aware of.
Just because we're alike doesn't mean we're compatible.
Well, you won't know unless you meet her. By the way, I haven't mentioned anything about you to her. She just said she'd meet you, since it's my recommendation. People trust me, you know?
Huh?
So, the stage has been set for everyone except me. Still, there's no way a CEO's daughter would be interested in an employee with no title like me. Besides, her parents are bound to object to my lie-laden life. Regardless, I decided to meet her in my usual suit. I had always thought that the answers to life's choices were predetermined. Mr. Smith had chosen a very upscale restaurant for the meeting. Apparently, that's where she wanted it to be. "Welcome, right this way," said a graceful hostess. When I entered the room, I was left speechless by the stunning beauty seated before me. The word ephemeral perfectly described her. She has a delicate and porcelain-white complexion with a hint of melancholy in her downcast eyes. Her fine hair, almost too translucent, catches a gentle light from the sun.
"Are you Thompson?"
A deep voice snapped me back to reality. Distracted by the beauty, I hadn't noticed, but standing next to her was a well-built man with dark skin, furrowing his brow and glaring at me. Must be his father. "Dad, please." "You're scaring him," pleaded Catherine. Her voice was as beautiful as she was, and I felt a warm flush spread over me.
I heard it was your trusted professor's recommendation, so I agreed. But this won't work. I can introduce someone much better than this plain guy.
No, Dad. I've made up my mind. I'm choosing him.
What?
Mr. Smith, her father, and I all exclaimed in unison. Is she out of her mind? We've only met a few minutes ago and haven't even introduced ourselves, and she wants to be with me? I don't know if she's rebellious or what, but don't want to be dragged into complicated affairs.
Are you sure, Catherine?
She silently nodded.
Enough of this nonsense.
Her father grumbled. Well, how about we start with introductions? Okay, said Mr. Smith, trying to break the awkward atmosphere, pulling on my arm to have me sit next to him.
Once again, this is Kevin Thompson.
Mr. Smith started the introduction in a lively manner, so I reached out to shake her hand. Miss Catherine Miller is giving me a friendly smile, but the gentleman next to her, Mr. James Miller, looks like he's ready to jump at any moment. It's needless to say that the contrasting attitudes of the two are causing some tension.
Usually, I work as a salesman at a construction company.
How's your performance?
Well, average, I guess?
The CEO chuckled derisively.
For an average Joe from a small company to think of marrying my daughter, you've got guts.
Well, I didn't exactly...
I continued in my mind. I'm not really trying to marry her, though.
Catherine, you see now? This guy doesn't seem to have the ambition to rise up. I can't allow you to marry someone like that. What a waste of time.
All this talk of marriage, isn't it moving a bit fast? I thought blind dates were about starting as friends and then maybe dating. It seems like it's either all or nothing here.
Haven't you noticed yet, Dad?
What?
Catherine let out a soft sigh and said, Your maiden name was Johnson, right? Mr. Johnson, Kevin? As soon as that name was mentioned, the CEO's face turned pale. I, too, felt a mix of nostalgia and dark emotions at the sound of that old name. Sweat trickled down the forehead of the stunned CEO.
The moment I saw you, I felt warmth in my chest. I recognized traces of the past in your face. I wanted to see you again.
She looked at Mr. Smith with tears in her eyes.
Mr. Smith, were you aware of this?
Well, I guess it's half and half. I did feel like you and him might get along when I heard your story.
The CEO keeps staring at me wide-eyed as always. It feels like his mind is somewhere far off, not so much looking at a person of this world, but as if he's witnessing a deity he once believed in appearing right before him. She asked, could we talk in private for a moment? Of course, Mr. Smith replied. She held my hand with teary eyes.
I'm so happy to see you again.
I'm sorry, have we met before?
Oh, right, of course.
Catherine sadly let go of my hand. No matter how much I try to recall, I just can't seem to remember meeting her before. Yet, I'm certain that Catherine and I had met somewhere in the past. It's clear from the way she acts.
It's a story from when I was very young. Back then I struggled a lot. Every day I had to meet my parents' expectations or face their disappointment. But I was just an ordinary person.
Oh.
It all came back to me when I heard her words. It was at a kindergarten. There was always this girl, dressed in high-end brands, always sulking. The teachers were always at their wits' end with her. I didn't really want to get close to her, but one day, I had trouble with a problem and ended up leaving late. As I was packing my things, she spoke from behind.
We're ordinary people, but we have a hard time.
I turned around and there she was, the girl I didn't like.
We're not the same, you and I.
I hurriedly packed and tried to leave, but she blocked my way.
We're both pitiable.
I was left speechless. Her words kept ringing in my ears even after I got home, turning my emotions upside down. Average. In my world, that was the worst thing to be called. I was born in a very average family. It all started with a test handed out at school. Young me solved it and submitted it. Little did I know that would be the first step to the downfall of my life. A test I solved without much thought. A week later, the school teacher called and told me my IQ was significantly higher than other kids. Taking his words to heart, my elated parents put me in a class in the gifted program. Being the eldest of 3 siblings, the pressure was immense. But deep down I knew the truth. I was just an average Joe, just an ordinary kid, and I wasn't even good at studying. Yet every morning would come, and with it, Another day of playing the genius began. I desperately clung to that genius title, all to not let my parents down. I would even scratch the back of my hand with the tip of a pen when I was too sleepy. Being average meant I had to put in multiple times the effort to maintain my genius facade.
It was tough, wasn't it? For both you and me.
Talking about the past always brings tears to my eyes.
My parents died in an accident during college. After that, I took my grandma's last name and decided to live my life truthfully. Thanks to Mr. Smith. You know, he's pretty laid back. Even with parents like that, their sudden death hurt. I was devastated, but then he said, "Now you're finally free from their shadow." I'm a college graduate, but I've started saying I'm a high school graduate. My life's been nothing but lies, but if I didn't, my past would haunt my present.
I might not have had it as rough as you, but I can relate to your feelings. I used to think, what if I wasn't me? I envied friends who came from average families and lived carefree lives.
Catherine gazed at her palms.
My parents showered me with love, more than I could hold in these hands. But I was a disappointing only child. I wasn't fit to be a CEO, nor was I the son my dad had hoped for.
That's not true.
Suddenly the door swung open and there stood Mr. James, his eyes bloodshot. Next to him, Mr. Smith was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief.
You're my precious daughter.
You really think that? It's because you see me as a failure that you're so cautious about who I marry.
He touched my shoulder and said with a shaky voice, "I'm sorry."
On behalf of your parents, let me apologize. We thought of your lives as if they were our own. We said we wanted you to be happy, but maybe we just wanted to be happy ourselves. We validated ourselves by pushing our excessive expectations on you. We were the worst kind of parents.
Dad,
It felt like the ice around this father-daughter relationship had started to melt, even if just a little. If my parents were still alive, would we have eventually sat down and had such a heart-to-heart? After that, Catherine and I decided to truly get married. From then on, we stopped lying about our pasts. When I revealed that I actually had a college degree, the construction company's boss simply responded, "Is that so?"
It doesn't matter if you're a high school or college graduate. I hired you because of who you are.
Boss,
Talking openly sometimes made me think too much about others. No matter how much you think about someone's feelings, it's just an imagination in your head. 2 years later, a little girl was born to us. A cool-faced girl resembling my wife. I wonder what life she will lead. I have to keep an eye on her to make sure she doesn't get more strange men. I mumbled and my wife laughed. My dad used to say that a lot. Becoming a parent, I began to slightly understand the expectations my parents had back then. We promised ourselves that we would raise our child without excessive expectations, but with as much trust as we could muster. Our role is just to add flowers to her life. Her happiness is her own, and she should grasp it herself.